This here is the Bell AH-1, a proven, manoeuvrable and a great anti-armour platform that first saw service in the Vietnam War, that now finds itself in the Arabian Gulf in 1991 supporting the Marines on the ground as they retake Kuwait from Iraqi control. This is a story of Desert Storm's AH-1s. The Sea Cobra was brought into Marine Corps service in 1971 under the AH-1J, which in the Gulf were operated by HMA 773 and 775. The improved AH-1T, with a lengthened fuselage and elements of the Model 309, was produced during the 70s and was operated in the Gulf by HMLA 269. The most modernised Cobra in Desert Storm was the Whiskey Cobra, or the AH-1W. Its variant was a modernised AH-1T, with revised fire control systems that would work with the new AGM-114 Hellfire, and was brought into Marine Corps service in 1986. 78 Cobras would be deployed to the Gulf, spread across various different squadrons to help support the Marines on the ground as they retook Kuwait. To do this, much like their Harriers, they will be operating very close to the front line, with the Cobras based on strip alerts for immediate employment from forward landing zones. The AH-1s would linger around the forward lines of their troops and provide them with close-in fire support with TOWs or Hellfires, rockets and their 20mm gun. Ahead of the Cobras were FastFACs, or Fast Forward Air Controllers, the backseaters in Marine Corps Hornets, picking up targets and rallying them back to AH-1s and AV-8Bs. OV-10Ds also filled this role of carrying forward air controllers. Right before Desert Storm, the Cobras were already in theatre and they saw action in Operation Praying Mantis in 1988, where 2 Iranian oil platforms were destroyed by Marine Corps Cobras using their BGM-71 TOWs. H-hour for Desert Storm came on the 17th of January 1991 and the air war kicked off. The AH-1s would be based at Al-Jubail Naval Air Facility, where they would then operate from forward landing zones. HMA 773's 14 AH-1Js would be based in USS New Orleans and USS Tripoli. However, 10 AH-1s would have to move ashore with MAG 50, based at Tanajib, to support the 5th Marine Expeditionary Brigade, where they would help escort CH-46s and CH-53Es. The remaining 4 stayed aboard the Tripoli until she struck a mine, and these 4 then moved to USS New Orleans. Marine Corps Cobras first saw action on the first day, launching to respond to calls from Marines and Navy SEALs positioned along the border. At around 0400 hours on the 17th of January, HMLA 369 launched a few Cobras to investigate reports of Iraqi tanks just north of Khafji. They couldn't find the tanks, so they went for Iraqi observation posts, which directed artillery. The next day, HMLA 369 got another request around Khafji, where they took out ammo trucks, 2 buildings and several mortar tubes, with their TOWs, unguided rockets and 20mm cannon. The Battle of Khafji was basically the first major ground engagement of the war, from 29th of January to the 1st of February 1991. The Iraqis pushed troops and armour towards the Saudi town of Khafji and fought Arabian, Kuwaiti and US forces and were repelled back. Most of the Marines' air support in this battle fell under the responsibility of the Cobras from Marine Light Attack Helicopter Squadron 367, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Kurth, and 369 commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Terry Frecker. These 2 squadrons split up their aircraft into 2 groups, with 8 Cobras each, and responded to initial calls from Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Marines, which guaranteed that the Iraqis would not go into Khafji unopposed. At 0100 hours on the 30th of January, 4 fought a gun duel against 6 Iraqi armoured personnel carriers positioned along a coastline road. It was the Cobra's M197 20mm guns and 270mm rockets pitched against the APC's 73mm guns. All 6 APCs were destroyed by the Cobras. Another Cobra flight, led by Captain Randall Hammond, destroyed 4 T-62s, and when 9 Iraqi soldiers were seen through the FLIR, waving white surrender flags, they used the helis to round them up like cattle, until the Marines on the ground reached their position and took the Iraqi prisoners in. However, Iraqi artillery was directed to their position, and the helis were forced to withdraw. However, on their egress, one of the Cobras scored another kill on a T-62 with a tow. It was clear that when the T-62 was hit, the turret flew off and landed upside down back on the hull. In the first few days of February, there was a string of accidents, when on the morning of the 2nd of February, an A6 accidentally killed 1 Marine and injured 3 others, and later that evening an AH-1J was lost in the Saudi desert whilst escorting an emergency medical evacuation. The following night, a UH-1N went down, killing the entire crew. Conditions became much worse for the Cobras once the Iraqis set the Kuwaiti oil fires alight. The constant fires created a low blanket of black smoke, and the Cobras had to fly under the smoke to support their Marines. However, they were mainly lingering around the highway of death, as the smoke was very bad over the Kuwaiti International Airport and Malta Ridge. The man in charge of MLAH-369, Lieutenant Colonel Kurth, got into some serious skill and endurance-based moments on the 26th of February, and his actions that day got him the Navy Cross. He led 4 AH-1s north to Al-Jabba and landed and awaited his solo scouting mission. The smoke was so dense that he could only stay a few feet above the ground, flying underneath the power lines. Yep, you heard that right, he flew under them. His scouting mission was that he needed to find the 1st Battalion 5th Marines, 3rd Tank Battalion and 7th Battalion 7th Marines. Once he linked up with these groups of Marines, he turned back to the forward landing zone, refueled his craft from some Marine tanker trucks, and led his wingman back through the smoke, then delivered Hellfires and 20mm against the tanks, armoured vehicles and bunkers. He repeated this many times throughout the day, eventually flying 10 hours straight. He flew through the Al-Burkan oil field fires between the AH-1W holding pattern and Task Force Reaper's forward lines, leading a flight after flight of Cobras to requesting units, then remained in an extremely exposed position forward of friendly lines. As many as 70 Iraqi armour units were destroyed in just that day. That same day, air components of 4th Marine Expeditionary Brigade, MAG-40, launched an aerial manoeuvre to trick Iraqi coastal air defences. 10 CH-46s, 4 CH-53s and 3 AH-1s were directed to Bubian Island and went low over the ocean in poor weather, with the entire flight skimming the waves with only their MVDs to see. As they neared the coast, they pitched up and formed a simulation of a heli assault and fired 50 cals at the shoreline to attract the Iraqi AAA. Once the Iraqi AAA started firing and lighted themselves up in the night, Navy A6Es were waiting and pounced on the distracted air defences. Overall, 1,273 sorties were flown, with 3 losses but none of them to enemy fire, proving how the AH-1 was still a capable helicopter for Marines years after it first went into Vietnam. To me, this seems so dangerous and courageous, going in and out of the combat zone, helping your Marine brothers on the ground take out enemy positions. Thank you guys for watching, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.